Today's video is sponsored by GadgetDiscoveryClub.com. Stay tuned for an exclusive offer. So this is a special episode that we're doing of Dead Last, and it's one that's unlike any that we've ever done before. I done a few where I ask you guys to participate, but this is the first time that I've used this format, and we're counting down the top 25 death scenes in horror, decided by you guys. Yeah, so what I did was I asked you to send me a list of your 10 favorite death scenes in horror, and I let you be lenient with what you define as horror. And then once you had your 10, I asked you to rank them and send me the list. And I had 102 entries, including my own. Normally, with Dead Last, I would have you count down to number one, being the best, but I used a different system this time around. I had you give your top scene the 10, and your least favorite of your favorites the 1. In this particular episode, the scene with the most points is the winner. So let's check out our most glorious moments of carnage.
Let's destroy humans.
At number 25, with 43 points, we have the death of Jack, Kevin Bacon's character in the original Friday the 13th. He received 8 votes, so the average score that he would be ranked is 5.25. I didn't have this one on my list, but I definitely appreciate the Tom Savini effects, and I do agree that it's my favorite death scene in that entire film, although Pamela's beheading is a close second. Coming in at number 24 with 44 points, only 1 point more than the Baconator, and we have another entry from the Friday series, and it's the tent scene from Jason Goes to Hell. This bit got only 7 votes, so one less person had it on their roster than our 25, but it had a higher average ranking of 6.25. And yeah, to truly appreciate this one, you actually have to check out the unrated version of it, because otherwise you don't even see anything. And it's wild that this did so well, considering that it's not even really Jason doing the deed. I didn't have this one on my list either, but yeah, it's a pretty badass effect. Our number 23 movie again only moved up by a single point, so all 3 here have only been 1 point apart. And with 45 points, we're looking at the introductory scene from Ghost Ship. This one got 10 votes, but had a pretty low average of only a 4.5. And this is another that I didn't have on my roster, but I do love this scene. In fact, it's literally the only thing I remember from this entire movie. It's absolutely a banger of an intro. And you know, I think one of the reasons it deserves to be on the roster is because, unlike a wide range of movies from the early aughts, which suffer from dated CGI, here there's a mix of digital and practical, and they cut between them so quickly it never really stands out. There was a slightly larger jump up for 22, not just a single point, but a whopping 2 points. And with 47 points, we have the death of Paul from the remake of The Blob. This one showed up on 9 lists and had an average ranking of 5.25, and one of those rankings was mine. But I had it worth 3 points. But I do love this scene. I think it's one of the most brutal and painful looking deaths in all of horror. But that's not it. Keep in mind that up until this point, Paul was poised as one of our main characters, the Steve McQueen of the film, so killing him off early was a surprise. And look at those effects. Like, you know, if they did this today, it'd be some digital atrocity, but this looks real and real disturbing. We are back to that single point differential here, since our number 21 movie sits with 48 points, and it's a classic since it's David Warner's decapitation in The Omen. This is another that got placed on 10 lists, although with a touch lower average of 4.75. I didn't vote for this one though, but how can you not love it? I mean, keep in mind, this was the mid-70s. This type of spectacle death scene wasn't really a thing yet, and the concept of creative kills hadn't become a trope in horror. So this outlandish beheading was really unique and set the bar for a lot of the genre going forward. With another increase in 1 point, we head up now to our number 20 scene, and it's one from a movie that people seem divided on, but not so much this scene, since with 49 points, it's Charlie from Hereditary. 11 people put this on their roster, but it did have a lower average with 4.5, tying Ghost Ship for the lowest average score on this entire list. It's also the most recent film listed here. No spoilers, but this movie came out in 2018, and not a single other scene on this entire roster is from the past couple of years. Every other flick mentioned is a minimum of 10 years old or more, so I think it says something that it's this far up with so little tenure. Our first film out of the 20s and our number 19 entry again moves up 1 point to 50, and it's a more classic one, and it's Bob's death in the 1978 Halloween. It only took 8 votes, less than the last 4 scenes, but it had a solid average of a 6.25. And this one is interesting because, as revered as the original Halloween is, it's not like people talk about how amazing the kills are. It's not like that's the primary focus of the movie. And this isn't even that spectacular. It's just a stabbing. But what makes it stand out is the way it plays out. The very fact that the force of the knife sticks him to the wall, and then Michael's curious head tilt, which inspired a million ripoffs with characters doing the same thing. Our number 18 scene has the biggest jump in points so far, since we're going up 6 points to 56, and we're looking at the infamous Roach bit from Nightmare on Elm Street 4. This is another one that didn't get a ton of entries, only 7 votes, the same number as our number 24 entry, but it had an amazing average of an 8, one of the highest on here. There's only one film with a higher average than it, so the people that had this on their rosters had it high, and I can see why. It's such a cool scene. Like, if you're talking horror and you say, well, the victim slowly turned into a giant roach with her arms morphing into these pincher things, and she eventually sloughs off her skin to be a massive roach in which Freddy then smashes her, you're like, oh, okay. But then you say they did that back in 1988 without a single digital effect and did it all with practicals and puppets. Well, I think you can see why it's so memorable. With a 4-point jump, we head down to our 17th place spot. And this is one that I really thought would be on here, but I swore it'd be higher. And it's the infamous sleeping bag smack from Friday the 13th Part 7. It did get placed on a lot of lists, 11 in total, but its average was only a 5.5, which brings it down a touch. And I think one of the things that makes this one stand out is the story behind it. Originally, Jason picks up the girl in the sleeping bag and repeatedly slams her into a tree. The MPAA looked at it and said, nah, that's too much. That's got to be cut down. So they reduced it to a single smack. And little did the censor board realize that it would end up making it about 10 times more intense. It's just one solid whack, and it's awesome. It's another single point difference now for our number 16 scene, and coincidentally, the same franchise, because with 61 points, it's Jason's own death from Friday the 13th, the final chapter. This had 9 votes and a pretty solid average with a 6.75, and here's an interesting nugget about this one. It's technically the only kill on this entire roster in where the main villain of the film is the one that's dying. There's one other that we'll discuss in a while that I guess can qualify, but instead of seeing Michael Myers or Freddy or Jason killing some teen, here we're getting a pretty spectacular death of the bad dude himself. And it is spectacular, not just for the initial bit, not just the whole Tommy hits him in the face with a machete. No, the scene is on here because Jason then falls down onto that machete and pushes it further into his head. And for a minute there, it looked like they were really killing off Mr. Voorhees for good. But I mean, we know how that turned out, don't we? Our number 15 is a tie. 2 movies reached 63 points, so we'll discuss them in terms of their averages. What we'll call 15B is Chrissy's death from Jaws, and it was on 12 lists with an average of 5.25. And yeah, you know that I had this on my roster, and not only that, but I gave it 9 points because this scene shaped me. I think you all know that Jaws is my favorite film of all time, And this is the exact scene that keeps me out of the ocean. I won't go in the ocean past my knees because I don't want to be dragged around by an unseen gliding monster. 15A is the one that we're putting a touch ahead, and it also had 63 points, and it's Philip from Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, The Dream Warriors. Yeah, it's the marionette scene. It was on 10 lists, 2 less than Chrissy, and had an average of 6.25. And oh boy, is this a scene that gives you the skeevies. Like, the whole concept of being led around by your freaking tendons not only looks creepy, but seems like it would hurt like hell. Another decent jump in points since our number 14 scene moves to 70, and it's another that you know that I approve of since it's Quint's death in Jaws. This landed on 13 lists, the most so far, and has a nice average of 7. And of course, I put this on my list too. I gave this 7 points. And even though it's clear that it's not my personal favorite death scene from this flick, but hot damn, it's memorable. I mean, what really gives this one an edge here is how it happens. If you say a guy is bitten in half by a shark, then yeah, whatever, seen it. But this is a guy on a tilted ship sliding down into the creature's waiting mouth. You can see him trying to fight it and then realizing that it's inevitable. He's getting closer and closer to being lunch until it finally happens. And it's that moment before it does that sells this one. Lucky number 13 jumps up just a couple of points to 72, and this is a wild one since it's the log scene from Final Destination 2. This one was on a dozen lists, and the average was a 6, which is pretty decent. And this is just one of those things that has entered the whole cultural zeitgeist. If you're on the road and you're driving near a logging truck, this is instantly the thing that goes through your head. I mean, pun intended, I guess. But yeah, you know it, and people around you know it, and if you see one of these on the road, you sure as hell aren't pulling up behind it. Our number 12 scene here was surprising to me because I thought it might go a bit under the radar, but I guess it's more impactful than I thought, since with 76 points, it's the opening death from the original Suspiria. This was only on 9 rankings, but its average score was an 8.5, so this was another one that was a big deal to the people that put it on here. And if you want to talk about brutal kills, this is the one. Probably the most intense and over-the-top thing on this list. Like it's just a knife killing, but he stabs her so many times that her chest has a hole in it, and he then stabs her exposed heart, but then hangs her and drops her through a freaking glass ceiling where the shards fall down and claim yet another victim. One thing about those witches, they're strong believers in overkill. Number 11 had our biggest increase in points so far, and we're climbing up a full 13 to 89. And this is the death of Kirk from the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This was on 15 lists, and that number just increases from here. And it had a nice average of 6. And I had this one on my roster too, but I had it pretty low since it was my 1-point entry. But this is just such a memorable bit. It's the moment of the movie in which the tide turns and it's all downhill for our group. But it's the way that it's shot that makes it stand out. And I really think that this one is on here not for the actual death itself, but what comes right after. I mean, I know for me, what really sells this scene is the way that it ends, with Leatherface towering over his victim, pulling closed that metal door, and the sound it makes is just so final. You know, I really feel like a good number of these people could have survived if they just had the right gadget to get them out of this situation, which they could have avoided if they only had a subscription to the Gadget Discovery Club to get their subscription box. Each box comes with a number of different gadgets, and my first one came with 4, and this particular one had not just 1, but 2 portable Bluetooth speakers, which is pretty awesome for me since it's handy to be able to take my music on the go, and let's face it, you're always on the go when you have a 6-year-old. And there's 2 of them, at least there were when I opened the box, but now it seems like there's only 1 in here. But I suspiciously hear music coming from upstairs in the bedroom, so either our ghost is back or Christy has already stolen one. And the club is super easy since everything is managed on their site, gadgetdiscoveryclub.com. And you can go and pick your plan from quarterly to annual and choose the number of boxes that you want to receive. Each one has anything from 1 to 4 different gadgets in it revolving on a particular theme like travel, nutrition, audio, and this one, which is everyday use. Use the site to manage your account, cancel, skip a box, increase your boxes, change your dates, or anything you need. And here's the scoop. If you go right now to gadgetdiscoveryclub.com/movietimelines, you can get a great discount of $20 off of the quarterly plan, the annual plan, or any gift using the discount code MovieTimelines. Heading into our top 10, the point differences are more intense, and our number 10 shot up 10 points to 99, and it's another Elm Street entry, the classic death of Jennifer from Dream Warriors. Like Kirk's scene, this also showed up 15 times, but had an average of 6.5, getting it top 10 status. And this is like the perfect storm of Freddy. It's this scene that's both terrifying and hilarious at the same time, and the one that establishes the status quo. You see, Philip may have had the first death of the film, and it's certainly creepier, but it lacks that whole one-liner aspect that Krueger's killings would soon run with. This is the one that lets you know that, hey, not only is this guy using weird and imaginative ways to murder, but he's going to give you a wisecrack to go with it.
Fuck the prime time, bitch!
Looking at our number 9 scene, we have another tie. There's 2 movies that got 111 points. Our first movies to break 100 points, and they were really close with averages as well. But our 9B with the lower average is the excruciating eyeball bit from Zombie, or Zombie 2, or Zombie Flesh Eaters, or whatever you want to call it. It showed up 21 times with an average of 5.25, and I did have this on my list with 2 points, and I hate eyeball stuff. And I don't know for sure, I can't really place it, but I wouldn't be surprised if this moment was where my distaste for it began. I mean, sure, it's not the most realistic of effects, but you know it makes you cringe every time you see it. But then also with 111 points, our 9A is one that I could have sworn would be in our top 3, but I'm just Mr. Wrong Guy here, and it's the exploding head from Scanners. It got 20 votes in total and had that slightly better average of 5.5, and I had this one on my list too, and I gave it 2 higher than that eyeball since I gave it 4 points. And wow, this scene, if you've never seen this movie before, it's just such a surprise. And I think that a good portion of why it works so well is that build-up, and Louis Del Grande absolutely sells that bit. You really feel like he's on the verge of blowing up, and then he does. Our number 8 entry snuck past with just a couple of points, and it landed with 114 in the end, and it's Casey Becker, as played by Drew Barrymore in the original Scream. This was on 18 lists, a couple less than both of the number 9s, but it had an average of 6.25, giving it the slight edge. And this is on here for good reason. This scene was a good deal of the marketing of the film and was one of the biggest surprises. In a nod to Psycho, of course, Barrymore, who had been billed as the star of the film and featured the most prominently in all the advertisements, ends up meeting her doom in the first couple of minutes. And let's face it, it's not just the death itself that's iconic here, it's the whole sequence from the popcorn on. It was a strong start to the franchise and lets you know that anyone was capable of being a victim. Our lucky number 7 here isn't exactly lucky given what we're talking about, but we had a big increase in points to 130 here, and it's Frank from the ending of Hellraiser. Our boy got listed 24 times with an average of 5.5, and here's a funny thing. Frank was a nominee twice in the same movie for this list. Yep, his death in the opening scene also showed up on a few lists, but this is the one that ended up getting listed here, and it's one hell of a scene, and I'm sorry about that. And I think what sells this one again isn't the actual death. Sure, the whole method is memorable, pulled apart by demonic chains into a whole bunch of pieces, but The reason why people talk about this and remember it is his continued defiance. Even with all that metal digging into him and tugging him into a dozen directions, Frank still resists enough to sneak out one last wisecrack.
Jesus wept.
Another small increase here as we go to our number 6 scene, and we're looking at 133 points for our first kill of a franchise since it's Tina from Nightmare on Elm Street. This was on 22 lists and had an average of a 6, and this definitely belongs here. This does a lot of heavy lifting for the series. It introduces Freddy's whole dream into reality MO and establishes the rules, more or less, but such as they are. But not only does it work from a story standpoint of giving you the entry point into the methodology of Krueger, but it also stands out as a super memorable moment. I mean, keep in mind, this was in the mid-80s. Slasher flicks were all the rage. This kind of supernatural death wasn't really in style at that point. So it was likely a bit of a surprise, but it was unique. An invisible killer slicing someone open, but then dragging them to the ceiling in front of their boyfriend only to drop them down on the bed below? Outstanding. Here we go again. Number 5 is another tie, since there's 2 movies that landed with 136 points. So again, we're giving the edge to the average, which makes our number 5B turn out to be the liquid nitrogen face smash from Jason X. It was on 27 lists, but only pulled an average of a 5, and surprisingly, this is our top ranking entry from the Friday series. It's kind of surprising to me that the most memorable of the franchise ends up being from one of the more derided entries. And it's kind of a shame that they didn't match that energy throughout, since most of the other deaths in the film don't take advantage of the whole future tech setup that this one does. And that's likely why it lands so high. It's not something that normally Jason can do, but a bath of liquid nitrogen on a future ship makes perfect sense, I guess, and gives the film a reason to love it, even if for some, it's like only the one reason. Our number 5A deserves the edge, though, since it's a pretty standout scene, and also with 136 points, it's the death of Rhodes from Day of the Dead. And I suppose it's important to clarify that we're talking about the first one and not either of the remakes. It's got 22 nods with the stronger average of a 6.25. And I had this on my list, boosting that average because I had it at an 8, because this one changed my opinion of horror. I wasn't a horror fan for a while and was pretty timid, and gross bits in movies would freak me out. However, after seeing a documentary about Tom Savini, and they showed exactly how they achieved this exact scene, I stopped seeing it as a scary and gross moment and saw it for what it was, a cool magic trick. But this scene isn't just on here for the moment itself. Like a few others I mentioned, it's all about how Rhodes reacts. I don't think nearly as many people would be talking about this if it weren't for the defiant jerk shouting at the zombies to choke on his entrails as they're eating him alive. And yes, this is the other one I was talking about, with him maybe being the death of the main villain, since it's debatable that Rhodes is the main villain of this film, as opposed to the zombies. Number 4 is a mild jump, but it climbed up 5 points to 141, and it's the final entry on this list from any of the big 3 franchises, and it's Glenn's bed explosion from A Nightmare on Elm Street. And this was on 23 lists, one more than Tina's death, and had matching average of a 6. And yeah, those 2 scenes from the same film were neck and neck the entire time. And it came down to one list that pushed Glenn up into 4th place. And out of everything listed in here, I'm pretty sure that this is the bloodiest, just in the sheer amount of the red stuff. This one has all the others beat. And I'm sure that part of its appeal is that it's a young Johnny Depp and you're seeing him get killed in a glorious way, but I really think that the key is that geyser. I mean, first off, it's just a cool effect. This just explosion of blood splashing up onto the ceiling. But I think another fascinating aspect of it is just how fantastical that is. There's just no way that there's that much blood in a human being. There's like 5 liters of blood in the human body on average. So that's like 2 2-liter bottles of soda and one of those 1 liter guys that is deceptive since they look small enough to drink in one sitting, but boy, are they not. But yeah, that's not much blood when you think about it. And this is, yeah, this is way more than 5 liters. Here we go, the top 3. And I have to say, I was kind of surprised by these 3. But then again, I guess also kind of not. But coming in at number 3, with a 23-point jump up to 164, we're looking at the shower scene, Marion's death in Psycho. This had 23 appearances on people's lists and ran an average rating of 7 on them, which took it up to this point. And I had it on my list too, although I gave it 5 points. But there's no denying that this is one of the all-time best deaths. It's both shocking in the way that it's filmed, as well as what it represented to the film world. I mean, keep in mind, they had to make people promise not to reveal what happens here to those that haven't seen the film yet, because the idea of killing off the main character, Janet Leigh, was groundbreaking. Our number 8 and our number 6, Casey and Tina, both owe this moment a bit of gratitude, because the idea of making the audience believe that one person is the main focus and then surprisingly killing them off starts right here. It's also a death that has been insanely analyzed from a technical aspect, considering the quick cuts and close-up techniques used in order to make you think that you've seen something that you haven't. They give you a close-up of her face and a shot of her belly and the knife just next to it, and then it cuts to her hand or something, and your mind connects the dots. You didn't see her getting stabbed, but you also did. And wow, number 2 was a massive increase in numbers, and very quickly it became apparent that it was going to be near the top, and nothing was even coming close to touching it except the number 1 scene, which was always beating it. And at number 2, with 230 points, we've got the Norris/Copper/defibrillator death from The Thing. And holy crap, this was on 33 lists and still maintained an average of a 7. And it's just a testament to this film and the level of effects on display here, because this is one of the coolest practical effects of the 80s, hands down. It comes so far out of left field and is so shocking, but then is also so fantastical that you can hardly wrap your head around what you're seeing. The cool thing is that they promised you that this creature could take on the shape of all sorts of different beings that it's assimilated, and here they're really delivering. I mean, sure, you saw how extensive its shape-changing skills were with the dog, but this is the first time you're seeing it just distort the human form into something decidedly not. And this scene just changes the stakes for the rest of the movie, because not only does it whittle down our crew, but it's what gives the inspiration for the blood test and the plot device to end the film. And here we go. Our number 1 film was Never Anything But. From the first rankings I received, it took an early lead and never once dipped beneath it. And it was a blowout, because coming in at a whopping 307 points, a full 77 more than our number 2 film, we're looking at the chest burster scene from Alien. And you remember when I said that there was 102 entries here? Well, 46 of them had this movie on it, and it maintained a strong average of a 6.75 rating. And this is just such an iconic moment. It's one that I really wish that I could see again for the first time without knowing anything about it. I mean, just think, the people going to see Alien had no clue what this movie was about. They just see this guy get this thing on his face, but then it dies and he seems fine. They have no clue what's happening next. They're not expecting him to go to breakfast and then have a whole ass baby creature pop out of his belly button. I mean, Lambert wasn't expecting it either, apparently. But this scene has inspired so many knockoffs and parodies to the point that it was an equally memorable moment in Spaceballs, of all things, and clearly deserves this number 1 spot. So there you have it, 25 of the best deaths in horror, voted on by you guys. Real quick, I want to highlight a couple that I voted for that didn't make the cut, including my 10-pointer. But first up, I gave 6 points to the Samuel L. Jackson surprise shark attack from Deep Blue Sea. It managed to get 34 points, about 9 points shy of making it on this list. But I saw this one in the theaters, and it's easily one of the most standout moments of any theatrical experiences that I've had. And my number 10, the top of my list, is a scene that did get 37 points, 6 points below what it needed to make the grade, and it's the hallway scene from Exorcist 3. And what a perfectly executed scene. One of the best jump scares in history. And it works so well because we see the nurse go into that room. We're waiting for something bad to happen, but she goes into that room and comes out. So everything's cool, right? Nope, not cool at all. And just such a great surprise. But that's not the entire list. But here's a quick rundown of every movie that got voted on. Check out the full list. Okay, so there it is. I enjoyed doing this, and I hope you did too. I hope you enjoyed sending in those rankings. So thank you to all of you that sent in their lists, and comment down below which was your top pick. And if you missed out on the voting, tell us what your favorite death scene, what your favorite death scene is. Let's hear. If you had a favorite one that isn't anywhere featured here, tell us down below. And I'll probably be doing, maybe we'll try an update on this one in the future and see if it holds true to that same ranking later on. But if you liked this, hit the like button. If you enjoy the channel, please consider subscribing and hitting the bell so you get notified when new videos come out. And if you think about it, go to my Patreon page at patreon.com/movietimelines and help support this channel. You can also just keep on watching and keep on participating in these Dead Last rankings. I like that too. Thanks, guys. And we'll see you very shortly for another great video. Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.